everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and my partners in the paranormal tonight are Mr. Blake Smith. I got tongue-tied. I am so sorry. And Mr. Chad Wandale. How are you, gentlemen?
We're doing pretty good.
I'm fighting off a headache. I know, I'm fighting off a headache. So I apologize in advance if I get mush-mouthed or stumbled over some words. But man, I got to tell you, you guys were looking at your beard and everything right before we get started. Chad was looking at his, and and Blake was looking at his scruff on there. I'm calling you Brad. I'm telling you, I don't know who you are tonight.
Fuck is Brad?
I don't know.
You cheating on me, Shelley?
Maybe. You'll forgive me though. But I was looking, we were talking about this, and I did like that. And right before we started, I realized that I have this little tiny hair right here. This little tiny wiry weird hair. And I plucked like 3 of them this week. So, I'm getting so much hair on my chin. I'm thinking about changing my fucking pronouns because it's like, oh my God, I what is this? I don't know. Anyway,
you're gonna go to Bigfoot.
I don't know. What are you laughing at?
Wow, what an intro. Welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal.
So now, you know me. I just say whatever this is pops into my head, and I apologize. I just got distracted when we all started doing this right before the show.
Oh, man.
Anyway, well, gentlemen, you doing good tonight? Everything rolling the way it should be for you?
Yeah.
Everything's going good.
Came off a good weekend of relaxation, investigations, and all kinds of fun stuff that we talked about on the Patreon. And tonight, our topic is about, we're going back to Australia, my favorite penal colony. I love Australia. I love everything about Australia. And tonight's story comes from Australia. And I am so excited. Yes. Okay. Yes. And
I got confused for a second. Sorry.
It's okay. Well, I was talking about changing my pronouns anyway. So, guys, do you know anything about Tilly Devine?
No, I do not actually.
That much.
And like
very little.
Like I just know basically her name and what you sent me so that we can put together the marketing for this episode.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you that her story fascinated me, and her story, Tilly Devine, is tied very closely to Kate Leigh. Now, Kate Leigh is going to make an appearance in our story tonight, but this is Tilly Devine's story, so we're going to stick very close to her information. But Kate Leigh's going to show up, don't you worry.
Okay.
So, gentlemen, if you are ready, yes?
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about Tilly Devine. Now, some people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and some are born with a leather boot on their back. And there's a particular kind of life that doesn't begin with promise. It begins with pressure. And in that tension between hunger and pride, there's an understanding that no one is coming to save you. And this was the kind of life that was waiting for Matilda Mary Twiss. Now, Matilda Mary Twiss, also known as Tilly, was born on September the 8th, 1900 in the slums of Camberwell, London. She was the 5th child born to Edward and Alice Twiss, and before she was 10, there would be 3 more children born into the household. The ever-expanding family meant that everyone worked as soon as they were able. And growing up in squalor and unimaginable poverty, she and her family lived on the edge of destitution. Her father, Edward, was a bricklayer, and it was dependable work when it was steady, but it rarely was. Money was thin and opportunities were even thinner, especially for women. And the options available were domestic service, the factory, or prostitution. And there was very little dignity in any. Many desperate women were forced to sell the only thing they owned, their bodies. And this wasn't unusual. Low wages, unstable homes, and few alternatives made the decision less of a choice and more of a reality. And at the age of 12, Tilly dropped out of school and became a prostitute.
That don't sit right.
Yeah. Now, as a child prostitute, Tilly soon learned that the wealthy gentlemen of London that were so dignified in their fancy clothes with their shiny shoes, they were the ones that had the greatest appetite for her services. And they were prepared to pay large sums of money for her company. And these exchanges weren't happening in expensive hotels or in beautiful homes. They were happening in the streets, down dirty alleyways, and in flop houses where rooms could be rented by the hour. And she was undoubtedly exploited and exposed to awful things. So she had to learn how to survive. So she watched men not just what they said, but what they wanted, what they feared, and what they would be willing to pay for without hesitation. And she studied how they behaved when they thought they were in control. And she also watched other women who controlled their clients, who lost control, and who was carving out some semblance of independence. And she learned how to fight violently. Being a child, if anyone was able to overtake her, she would most likely be found dead in the street. Stepping back from a fight was never an option, and the young, pretty, vivacious child became streetwise and ruthless. She was learning the system, and she paid attention to how the money moved, how deals were made in whispers, and how power could be built quietly without anyone knowing until it was too late. Now, when World War I broke out in 1914, London was flooded with soldiers. Soldiers on their way to the front lines and those returning from the horrors of war sought comfort in the arms of the London working girls. And among them were soldiers from the Australian Imperial Force. And these men were highly sought after by the local prostitutes because they were better paid. They earned almost double the amount of a British soldier. And in 1916, a handsome man named James Edward Big Jim Devine was among the Australian soldiers stationed in London. He was a sapper with the 4th Tunneling Company in the Australian Army. Now, a sapper is a combat engineer that does everything from constructing and repairing roads and airfields, breaching fortifications, layering or clearing minefields, building bridges, and digging tunnels. And they support the movement, defense, and survival of the Allied forces while impeding enemy operations. And sappers were also trained to serve as provisional infantry when required, making their role both technical and combat-oriented. So that's what Big Jim does. He's kind of a jack of all trades in the Australian Army.
Okay.
So, born on August the 22nd in 1892, Jim Devine had grown up in Victoria. Why he had enlisted in the military is not known. Perhaps he was in search of excitement. Maybe he just wanted to see the world. And in Australia, Big Jim had a job of shearing sheep. He was a tall man with a dubious character. He was violent, brutal, and foul-mouthed whether he was drunk or sober. And he was terrible at keeping his commitments. And when he joined the army, he skipped out on his duties so often that he was eventually declared an illegal absentee. And most of his time in London was spent on the run or in the hands of the military police. But he was the kind of person that could draw people in with his confidence, rough edges, and fascinating stories that most likely he didn't fully tell. But something about this dark-tempered man caught Tilly's attention, and the pair spent many nights together. And Big Jim confided to Tilly that he was a millionaire and that he had many prospects back home, including an Australian kangaroo farm. And then he proposed marriage. Now, Tilly, seeing the opportunity to leave London and a life of prostitution behind her, she said yes. And on August 12th of 1917, the pair were married in the Sacred Heart Church in Camberwell, London. But before the ceremony, when asked their ages, Tilly lied to the priest and told him she was 21. In actuality, she was only 16, and Big Jim Devine was 24. Now, it was a quick marriage, and it's difficult to know for sure if it was entered into by affection, opportunity, or mutual convenience. But for Tilly, it was her way out. And this wasn't your typical wartime sweetheart marriage. It was a relationship that was marked with verbal and physical violence. The pair were truly a match made in hell. Both were heavy drinkers, fighters, and neither knew how nor were willing to step back from an altercation. Yep. Big Jim, almost 6 feet tall, would hit the 5'4" Tilly, and she'd hit him back, fighting and carrying on until one left, one was unconscious, or the cops were called to break it up.
God. I mean,
Five
I love
foot-
you too, babe.
Well, yeah, 5'4" nothing. Just
So they had an Ike and Tina Turner relationship.
Yeah. That chick's 2 inches taller than me, and I'll fight you.
Napoleon.
But
Napoleon.
the fighting also led to making up. And it's alleged that Tilly gave birth to a baby girl named Alice Teresa Devine on March the 18th of 1918. The baby was born prematurely and passed away the very next day. Now, there is no official record of this baby. It's only a story told in the family history by Tilly's mother, who was said to have been present at the birth. Now, even though she was a married woman, Tilly's prostitution days weren't over. The money was substantial, and with the protection of her husband, she continued to work the streets. And soon, she was pregnant. In October of 1918, she was arrested for soliciting on the Strand and was given the opportunity to either pay a hefty fine of 40 shillings or go to jail. Now, being arrested was nothing new to Tilly or any of the London women that worked the streets. It was a hazard of the job. She had been arrested multiple times between 1915 and 1919 for claims of prostitution, theft, and assault. And many evenings had been spent in lockups and the Bow Street courts. So she paid the fine and went right back to work. Now, on May the 27th, 1919, Ralph Frederick Twist Devine was born. Now, World War I officially ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles on June 28th of 1919. And shortly after, Big Jim Devine's company was called back to Australia. And he told Tilly that he would go back and reestablish his life. So when she was able to come, everything would be ready for her. And he departed. Now, after the war, Britain struggled. Jobs were scarce and the economy struggled under the weight of recovery. But Australia, that promised something different. Hope and opportunity and distance from her past. And Tilly dreamed of a life of luxury and comfort. It was a place where she could start a new life with some respectability. So she packed her few possessions and abandoned their 7-month-old son Frederick with her parents to raise. Then she boarded the Wamana War Bride ship and followed Jim to Sydney to live the life of the wife of a millionaire on a kangaroo farm. Now, Tilly's name is the second name listed there that's highlighted. That's her passage, documentation of passage on the War Bride ship.
I like that last bit, to live the life of the wife of a millionaire on the
kangaroo farm. That's right.
Bitch, give me my title back.
Right? It's like crocodile hunter guy, like,
Right.
but with kangaroos.
Right.
Yes, sounds fun, doesn't it? Living on a kangaroo farm. Heck yeah.
Oh, heck yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it helps that she's a good fighter.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
She could take a kangaroo. I'm quite certain of it.
I doubt that, though.
They're mean little
Yeah.
bastards.
Yeah, I know.
Little bastards.
Now, unbeknownst to Tilly, at the end of the First World War, it seemed that Sydney was in a battle for its soul. It wasn't the picturesque city that we think of today. Gangs roamed the streets, and lifeless bodies often littered the pavement. Brothels, illegal bars, and gambling was everywhere. And the underworld was thriving. You see, prohibition had hit the country hard, and for the Australian soldiers that were returning to home, this was not a great welcome home present. Parts of Australia, including Sydney, had recently passed what was known as the 6 o'clock closing law. Bars and pubs that had been allowed to operate until 11 p.m. were now required to close at 6. And men who got off work at 5 had only an hour to consume their alcohol, which led to rapid and heavy drinking.
Yep.
And the daily mad dash for the alcohol became known as the 6 o'clock swill. And a woman named Kate Leigh was capitalizing on Sydney's thirst. And Kate felt no need to follow the 6 p.m. rule. She opened a chain of illegal after-hours bars and had establishments suitable for every patron, from working class to the high-end clientele. And she made good money, though most of it was made through bootlegging. And some might think that a woman wouldn't have the stomach to deal with the underbelly of society. But when Kate found crime, she discovered she was pretty good at it. You see, she had grown up. Well, she did.
Sorry.
And she had grown up in a neglectful household with a father who was a drunk. And she went straight from that into a string of violent relationships with various petty criminals. And when Australia made cocaine illegal, she took advantage of that too. She bought up all the coke she could and sold it for a substantial markup. She ran gambling parlors, brothels, and provided sly grog, which was also known as illegal alcohol. And she provided cocaine. And it was rumored that even though she made her money off of illegal vices, she was actually a teetotaler, imbibing and none, wouldn't touch the stuff. But she wore furs and diamonds and doted on her little Pomeranian dogs. And Kate Leigh was known as the Queen of Surrey Hills. Now, when Tilly arrived in Sydney on January the 13th of 1920, she got an unexpected surprise. Her husband, Big Jim Devine, he was not a millionaire. He was penniless and kangarooless.
Penniless and kangarooless.
Double whammy.
Damn.
You better hop to it.
Oh, right. But good job.
The home he took her to was a rented flat on Glenmore Road in Paddington. It was a rundown slum area filled with overcrowded and badly constructed shanties. It was a seedy area on the outskirts of town, complete with drug dealers, sly grog sellers, and brothels. Jim had come back to Australia and established himself as a standover man, which was also what's known as an enforcer. He could be hired by anyone who needed protection, a debt collector, or to provide, some motivation to an uncooperative client. And he rented cars. But this business wasn't like Enterprise, but he would come and pick you up if needed. His rentals were for criminal purposes. Gangsters often rented his vehicles to use as getaway cars. And also for a fee, he would pick up sex workers and drive them to the clients' houses. He was a man with a plan. And his plan for Tilly was that she was going straight back on the street and back into prostitution.
Oh, fuck that. I'm sorry, your Enterprise reference got me.
I thought it was funny.
And I guess he's running the first sex Uber, but
yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
Damn.
Now, once again, Tilly Devine entered into the sexual workforce. She was from England. She was foreign. So she could charge a higher price of 10 shillings per encounter. And she carried a cutthroat razor for her protection. Jim was her husband, her pimp, her chauffeur, and sometimes her getaway man. And Jim also started selling opium and cocaine, to bring in a little extra money. And within a year of arriving in Australia, Tilly was arrested for prostitution. But it wouldn't be her last. Between 1920 and 1925, Tilly racked up 79 convictions. And they ranged from offensive behavior, indecent language, assault, fighting, consorting with known criminals, and then prostitution was in there as well.
79? Jesus.
In 4 years.
In 4 years.
Yep.
I mean, they seem to have a turnkey policy here, because you'd figure she'd have done a significant amount of jail time, but it's almost like a fine collection system. They weren't worried about getting off the street.
4 years, almost 80 convictions, 20 a year.
You're every other week.
You're basically, I mean, because
52 weeks in a year, take away Christmas and Thanksgiving.
Because she's not going to work on Christmas and Thanksgiving. I mean,
she might.
I like her spunk. I'll give her that. I mean, I don't condone the business of what she's doing, but product of her time, so to speak. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, and Tilly made every one of the cops that arrested her earn their money. She was never one to hold her tongue, and she took every opportunity to hurl filthy insults at the authorities and rarely went into custody calmly. Now, with all the arrests, what does the comment say, please?
Damn, Tilly, they aren't trophies.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that was good. Sorry, go ahead.
Now, with all of the arrests, the police were very familiar with her scrappy little face, and there was no love lost between them. The police described her as one of the worst broads out there. And usually she was fined or put in a jail cell for a few days before being let go. And that was the pattern. Until the day that Jim came home, bloodied and beaten up. Now, Tilly demanded to know the name of the man that had harmed Jim. And the pair, they might have fought viciously with each other, but no one was going to attack the other one without punishment. And go ahead.
No, I like where what? I have the same thing. Like I can
say whatever I want to you, but nobody else better step to you.
I can say things about my partner, and my partner can say things about me in a joking way, but nobody else better jump in because we both gonna turn on you at that point.
I'll cut you.
Right. Well, Jim refused to tell her, so Tilly sought out the information on her own, and it wasn't long before she overheard a man bragging to a group of men about he'd beaten up Big Jim Devine, and his name was Sidney Cork. So Tilly stalked her prey. She waited until he was sitting in a barber chair, ready for his shave. She stormed into the shop, pulled out her razor, and viciously slashed the man's face. She screamed at Sidney Cork, warning him that he better not ever come near Big Jim Devine again, or she'd be back to teach him another lesson. And this time he wouldn't forget it. Tilly turned, straightened her hat, and calmly walked out of the shop. The men were stunned. There was blood splattered on the chairs, the walls, the ceiling, and the barber. Now, women were not permitted in areas typically reserved for men, like bars and barbershops, and this broad just waltzed in, slashed a man's face, and then left as if nothing had happened.
Like Matilda.
Now, Sidney Cork lived, but he required 17 stitches to close the gaping wound in his face.
Damn, that's a big wound, man.
Damn. Want to make sure he didn't forget.
This lady is crazy. Thanks, Gage.
Oh, it gets better, Gage. Just hold on. She was charged with, she was arrested again, and she was charged with malicious wounding, and she was put on trial. Now, the people crowded in the courtroom to see the woman that the newspapers were calling the worst woman in Sydney. And they were also calling her the Queen of the Night. Now, she was sentenced to 2 years in jail. And she paid for her crime in jail, but she benefited from it in terms of her reputation. Now, some of these stories say that Cork was just slashed on the hand, but it's thought that he put up his hand to defend his face, and he got his face and his hand. But either way, Tilly left a mark.
Yeah, I'd say so.
No kidding.
Damn.
So now when Tilly emerged, she did her time. And when Tilly emerged from prison, she was ready to go on to bigger and better things. You see, she'd had time to think and time to plan, and she was tired of being a prostitute. And Tilly knew that looks don't last, and she was determined to become a businesswoman. So she and Jim started looking for other ways to make a living that would keep them both out of jail. And this is when they learned about the Police Offences Act of 1908. That law had made it illegal for a man to run a brothel or profit off the earnings of sex workers. But it didn't say anything about women.
Damn.
Loophole.
So this loophole made it perfectly legal for Tilly Devine to become a madam. So Tilly started buying small properties and organizing other prostitutes to bring them under her control. At first, this meant shared housing and providing meals and coordinating clients and protection from violent customers and medical care if they needed it. But the operation didn't stay small for long. She bought more properties. Now, they weren't grand estates, but they were boarding houses where transactions could take place behind closed doors with a certain level of control. And Tilly understood control. She had learned that at the age of 12. If you controlled the space, you controlled the income. And if you controlled the income, then you could expand. And that is just what she did. She owned a string of brothels throughout Sunny Hills, Darlinghurst, Paddington, and Woolloomooloo. Her organization had structure, and she divided her workers into 3 categories: elite call girls who would cater to the wealthy clients, boat girls, as they were known, who would specifically be for the sailors and the soldiers. And then there were the tenement girls, They were the women who worked the streets. And she decided that her patrons might be thirsty too, so she decided to sell some sly grog and might as well throw in some cocaine and gambling to go along with it. Every vice that the city tried to suppress, Tilly monetized. And Tilly was strong. She was a strong and able woman, but she was smart enough to know that she couldn't build an empire without muscle. So she employed a large staff of standover men, bouncers, and bodyguards to protect the premises and the women who worked there. And she became known as the Queen of Woolloomooloo. Now the money flowed, and the Devines moved to a nice home in the middle-class suburb of Maruba. I knew I was going to mess it up. And this was much to the chagrin of their respectable neighbors. You see, Tilly threw wild and lavish parties, and the neighbors often witnessed violent arguments between Tilly and Jim. And the house was subject of police raids and sometimes shootouts.
Oh, just sometimes? Just shootouts?
Just sometimes, not all the time. They had to sleep sometimes.
Yeah, just shootouts. Sometimes shootouts. That's it.
Now, in 1927, two important pieces of law were passed. The Dangerous Drugs Act, which outlawed cocaine. Now, until that point, cocaine could be obtained from doctors and from pharmacies. But the government was trying to clean up the city and reduce the amount of violence and drug availability to addicts, many of whom were soldiers that had returned from the war. And the Pistol Licensing Act of 1927, which outlawed and leveled heavy penalties for the possession of handguns. And anyone found in possession of an unlicensed firearm would automatically get jail time. But the government was misguided if they thought that they were going to be able to, they thought that banning guns was going to quash the violence in the street. Because, see, the criminal underworld is nothing if not adaptable. So gangsters began to carry razors, not the cheap plastic ones that you find in local drugstores. They carried the ones used in barbershops, the razors that were known as cutthroats. They were easy to conceal, and the results of razor fights were devastating and bloody. Faces could be slashed in seconds, and it wasn't just violence. It was up close and personal destruction. Razor scars marked you for life.
That's a whole different type of, we hear about throughout history duels and, obviously like drive-bys and hits and all that kind of stuff. Oof, razor fights? Golly, you got to get close, like Shelley just said, close and personal to your target. Ooh, God.
They had to make it a fair fight. You had to get close enough.
Yeah. Damn.
But no one builds an empire without resistance. And it was inevitable that Tilly Devine and Kate Leigh would come up against each other for control of the Sydney underworld. Their territories overlapped, their businesses clashed, and their personalities collided. Both women were showy, they enjoyed their furs and their diamonds, and they both employed gangsters and standover men to protect their investments. And Tilly had made many enemies while running her business, but her most notable adversary was Kate Leigh. These two strong-willed, successful women, with the razor gangs that they employed, ran the Sydney underworld. And by the late 1920s, the criminal underworld was already unstable. Illegal cocaine flowed through boarding houses. The grog shops operated behind false doors and covered windows. Prostitutes, police informants, bookmakers, and razor men with different loyalties crowded the same narrow streets, night after night after night. And towering over that world were two women, Tilly Devine and Kate Leigh. Now, newspapers tried to simplify their feud into something theatrical, like they were two glamorous crime queens just clawing at each other like alley cats. But the truth was much uglier and far more dangerous. Their rivalry was over territory and money and cocaine routes and brothels and influence over the men that were willing to kill for them. And no one knows exactly what started the bloody feud. But the one story that has survived longer than any other, and historians do believe that there's some truth in it, is the thing that is thought to have started the infamous razor wars was a dog. Now, Kate Leigh adored small dogs, particularly her little fluffy Pomeranians. And I know it sounds absurd, but one of the toughest women in Sydney, an underworld boss who dealt in cocaine and violence, fussed endlessly over her tiny little lapdog like an aristocrat.
I get it. Valid. I have one sitting 2 feet away from me that looks just like that.
Now, in the brutal world of 1920s Sydney crime, affection for animals wasn't unusual. Many gangsters trusted dogs more than people. Dogs didn't inform to the police. Dogs didn't steal their money or territory, and dogs didn't testify in court. And Kate Leigh, despite her reputation for violence, spoiled her animals shamelessly. Now, according to a long retold underworld story, sometime around 1927, one of Kate Leigh's beloved Pomeranians disappeared, and suspicion quickly fell on Tilly Devine. Now, it isn't known if Tilly truly stole the dog or had someone else take it, or if she merely spread the rumor to provoke Kate. It's never been conclusively proven. And like much of gang history, facts immediately blurred into the myth. But people associated with both sides claimed the insult was deliberate. Not because the dog itself mattered strategically, but because the humiliation mattered. And in the underworld, being humiliated demanded retaliation.
Yeah.
And the story whipped through the streets overnight. Kate Leigh stormed through Tilly's establishments demanding answers. She accused Tilly's women of kidnapping the animal, and Tilly's people mocked the accusation openly. And that was the point. The alleged theft wasn't important because of the dog. It was important because it was disrespectful. And it was a public challenge. It was a way of saying to Kate, I can reach into your world and take something that you love. Now, there are many versions of the story. One tells the little dog later reappeared, but it had been dyed a different color, so Kate wouldn't immediately recognize it. Now, another version of the story states that Tilly herself paraded her new dog, the Pomeranian, through Palmer Street just to taunt Kate. And yet another version of the story tells that Tilly, also a fan of Pomeranians, had borrowed the dog from Kate Leigh for said service. And when the time came to return the dog, Tilly swapped Kate's dog for one of her own old dogs. And she dyed the dog's fur to match the dog that she had borrowed from Kate. So it's just another alternate ending to the same story. Tilly liked the borrowed dog and just decided to keep it.
I just like how many layers there is.
Just depends on which story you read about it.
This just says later reappeared. It's dyed a different color. Oh yeah. No, she has dear God.
Yeah. So the details may be embellished from years of retelling, and details are probably have been added by journalists, but at the emotional core of the story persists because it fits perfectly into for the personalities of these two women. Kate took things personally, and Tilly enjoyed psychological warfare. But the tension between the criminal organizations finally exploded into open violence. The Razor gangs were primed for a conflict, and people were choosing sides. The Pomeranian incident was symbolic. It was a bizarre little spark that ignited a barrel of gunpowder. And the papers loved it. The image was irresistible. Two of the most feared women in Australia, surrounded by razor men, hookers, and cocaine dealers, were feuding over a fluffy little dog. And they even reported that when Tilly found out that Kate had 2 dogs, Tilly rushed out to buy 3 dogs just so she could have more dogs than Kate.
Oh my God.
That bitch.
But beneath the humor was real bloodshed. Within months, razor attacks multiplied. Men loyal to one side or the other began slashing faces, attacking sly grog shops, ambushing unsuspecting rivals, and carrying out retaliatory assaults. And the razor wars had begun. And somewhere in the middle of it was a tiny stolen Pomeranian. Now, there is nothing like a cat fight to get people's attention. And these two crime queens did not hide behind their gangs. They routinely traded punches through beer glasses and engaged in public street brawls whenever they crossed paths. And they were fighting for absolute control of Sydney.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Now, Tilly Devine continued to collect arrests. She had become known as one of the most violent criminals in the game. She built her empire on this reputation, and her temper was legendary, terrifying, and let's be honest, quite impressive. Tilly took precisely zero crap from anyone. She went into bars and refused to be separated by gender. She'd sit where she wanted. She had a hair trigger that could turn on a dime, and she was never afraid to brandish her razor that she kept tucked into her luxurious frock stole. And she demanded absolute loyalty from those around her. When she found out one of her working girls wasn't turning over all of her money, she beat the girl and cut her face from earlobe to mouth before firing her and turning her back out on the streets. She also slashed her John's face to ribbons when there was a dispute over the payment to one of her girls. And she had even doused a disobedient crooked cop in petrol and set him on fire.
She crazy.
Just making a barbecue.
Holy shit. Like there's a moment where you cross and there's no coming back from it. And this is definitely that moment.
Yeah, when you set somebody on fire, that's a whole nother level of
Yeah.
Now, Tilly's rage didn't always flare up over legitimate reasons. She was hauled back into court after she purchased some beef from a butcher and decided that it was bad. So she stormed back into the shop and threatened to plunge a knife through his heart if he didn't reimburse her. And she went raging through the shop, forcing other customers to smell the beef and confirm that it was bad. Well, not a single customer was willing to say that there was nothing wrong with the meat. So Tilly was refunded and she left. Now, the papers reported that she had brandished a large butcher knife during the conflict. But in the same article, the paper also stated that Tilly Devine could be a charming hostess, but when the gloves came off, she was a different Tilly. But the rivalry between Tilly and Kate continued to escalate. Tilly attacked one of Kate's friends named Vera Lewis, and the newspaper stated that Lewis alleged that Devine scratched her and, getting her teeth in her little finger, she wouldn't let go until the police intervened. She was trying to bite her finger off.
Good God.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Again, this is Tilly's story, so.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell you that neither of these women like cops, and neither of them were necessarily willing to rat the other out for questionable tactics. But they weren't above assisting an officer in need. Now, there's a rare eyewitness account that survives from a police officer in Sydney. It was a female officer, and it's her story, and it was her first week on the job. And she was in Sydney, and she had been assigned to go on patrol and gather information about the neighborhoods and the comings and goings of those there. Now, Tilly saw the officer and took exception to being spied on. She confronted the officer in the street and grabbed her by the collar and began to shake her, cursing at her the entire time. And as a tram passed by, a figure came flying off of it, and it was Kate Leigh. She dove from the tram, sucker punched Tilly in broad daylight.
Oh my God.
Tilly, taken by surprise, fell to the ground, and before she could get back up, Kate jumped on top of Tilly and sat on her. And then Kate turned to the officer, and she's reported to have said, "Do what you got to do, love. I'll be here when you come back." And then she turned to Tilly and warned, "The next time you declare on her, I'll give you a second helping." Yeah. Some days later, Tilly did retaliate and caught Kate in the middle of Oxford Street. The two women pounced on each other, and Tilly was a dirty fighter, and she took Kate to the ground. Kate's hat was knocked off, and Tilly pummeled her. And in that instance, Kate got the worst of it.
This is one of those moments I see the Friends episode where the two girls are starting to fight, and Joey throws himself and goes, "No!" But he's holding everybody else back. He goes, "What'd you do that for?" He goes, "Because you're going to try to stop him." My brain thinks like, what does the public actually think of this? Are they like having their fucking popcorn, or are they just like, oh, here we go again? Like,
I would think so. I would think that you picked your side, you stayed out of the way, and you watched the show ensue.
I mean, at this point, I'm thinking somebody's got to be taking bets on this shit, right? Like,
gotta be.
What's the over under? Make some money, guys.
I wish I could find a story that said they actually did that, but I didn't.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So the Razor Wars escalated. And the Razor Wars, it wasn't a single war. It was a series of conflicts over territory and money and control of the same illicit markets. And chaos reigned. Kate trashed Tilly's brothels. Tilly smashed Kate's stores. Kate slashed up Tilly's sex workers. Tilly slashed Kate's coke dealers. Kate set up rooftop snipers, allegedly because, guns have been outlawed. And Kate and Tilly, when it was just the two of them, though, they usually fought with their fist when fighting with each other. And on it went.
Jesus.
Now, when these two worlds collided, the results were inevitable. And the streets, they became unpredictable. Ambushes happened quickly. One moment, someone would step behind a door only to emerge seconds later with his face slashed open. And the women were not spared. Those aligned with one side or the other became targets, and the messages were sent in blood. And the young men, many of them petty criminals looking to make a name for themselves, picked a side and brandished a razor. The razor gangs were loose collections of individuals tied together by loyalty, money, and fear. And the police did what they could. The raids increased and the arrests multiplied. And Tilly herself was brought into court over and over, charged with everything from keeping a disorderly house to more serious offenses. But she consistently seemed to beat the charges, mainly because the witnesses disappeared or changed their stories or came down with bouts of amnesia or blindness, couldn't remember, didn't see anything, or they flat out refused to cooperate. You see, Tilly understood leverage and she used it. Now, I can hear somebody's mic. July 17th, 1929, Kate Leigh's gang, led by George Gunman Gaffney, ambushed gangsters Frank Green, Sid McDonald, and the Devines. They were able to escape to Tilly and Jim's Marabou home. They strapped in and waited for the next attack. And it came shortly after midnight. Kate's men opened fire on the house and tried to get in. George Gaffney was fatally wounded by Jim. Now, when the cops arrived, Big Jim Devine was arrested and put on trial for murder. But in the court, Jim stated that he had fired a gun only to scare the assailant away, not to harm him. And he was found not guilty of murder because he was deemed to have been protecting his family and his property. Now, after the attack by Kate, the stage was set for an epic battle. Each woman wanted total domination, and there was only one option: all-out war. In August of 1929, both sides clashed in one of the most infamous gang fights in Australian history, the Battle of Kellett Street. Men, after consuming large amounts of sly grog and snorting piles of cocaine, battled it out for control of Eastern Sydney's criminal business.
How can this go horribly wrong? Sorry, go ahead.
Everybody wants kung fu.
Yep. They battered each other with rocks and bricks. They slashed with razors, and they occasionally pulled out guns. And it was an all-out melee. And when the smoke cleared, men lay dead in the street. And when the police showed up, they found 12 men that were injured but still alive. And they tried to get them to reveal the names of their assailants. But no one would breathe a word about anyone that was involved. It was the gangland way. Street business was handled by the street, and no one dared to snitch.
Well, that would be another basically price on your head if you did. I mean, that's the unspoken rule of that. We handle it the way that we handle it. No police involved, and if you do, there's going to be a retaliation for it.
Right.
Did anybody else get the vision of the scene from Anchorman where they all were fighting? And he goes, I'm sure you stabbed somebody with a trident. Where'd you get a grenade?
Yeah.
Like,
it was that kind of a melee. It was just a melee.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, the police were at a loss at what should be done. So the government, again, passed another law. They passed the Vagrancy Act that came into effect in 1929. And this allowed the police to arrest and jail anyone found to be consorting with thieves, prostitutes, or vagrants. It also allowed the police to arrest anyone they thought had bad character. They could also arrest anyone caught using a razor as a weapon. And if they arrested you for the razor, you were immediately jailed and flogged. Now, it was a far overreaching law. But with the gangs, it worked.
Huh.
So while Tilly was building success in business, her marriage to Jim was crumbling. He drank heavily, clashed with authority, and drifted in and out of trouble. And there were reports of violence, even more vicious than normal, between the couple. There were separations, and sometimes they lived entirely apart, but they remained tied legally. Jim's criminal record was growing. He was involved in shootings and assaults and disturbances, and that was bringing way too much attention to Tilly. They were navigating the same underworld, but without the same discipline. Where Tilly was strategic, Jim was volatile. Okay, and everywhere I read, it says that Jim's the volatile one in this relationship. So we can only imagine.
I was going to say, what the hell is he like then? Dear God.
This is not Jim's story.
He's got the grenade.
Yeah, pretty much.
God.
In January of 1930, Tilly was pinched under the Vagrancy Act, and so was Kate. Tilly, not being an Australian citizen, negotiated that she would leave the country and go back to England for 9 months in lieu of jail. Kate was sentenced to 1 year in jail for possession of a tin of cocaine. And surprisingly, both of the women's organizations were so well structured that they kept running even in their absence. The women both realized that sitting on each other in the streets did nothing for their public image. So they decided to start running their own public relations campaigns using the newspapers. And each woman was determined to prove herself the superior crime boss, fashionista, philanthropist, and Pomeranian owner. The result was that they both ended up looking crazy, but the headlines and the quotes were a lot of fun. Their rants and barbs were Their rants and barbs were published, and each believed that she was winning the battle in the court of public opinion. They staged opulent photo shoots depicting the women in their queendoms and all their fine clothes and jewels. Kate wore 1,000 pounds of diamonds for one of them.
Jesus.
God.
Now, one of the exchanges published was, Tilly, the underworld took their hats off to me and classed me a lady next to her. Kate, I'm not the worst woman in Sydney. Tilly Devine earned that title of, but you can call me the most notorious. Tilly, sure, Kate never worked as a prostitute. Who'd have an old bag like that on him anyhow? And of course, the dog came up again.
Oh my God.
Oh God.
Kate stated that she had given Tilly a Pomeranian. Now, Tilly was quick to reply, never in her life did she give me a dog. Why, my dogs have a pedigree, and they are a class above hers. Those are my dogs, and she should shut her stupid mouth. Now, Tilly did realize that she could remake her image through acts of charity. So she donated to the Salvation Army and helped the homeless and donated to orphanages. Well, Kate followed suit. Kate donated presents to needy children. Never mind that they were stolen. Her heart was in the right place. And Tilly was known for her lavish wartime parties. So she began to host them as charity events. One of the more notable ones was her Ball of the Year. And she rented the Maccabeen Hall at Darlinghurst, telling the management that the function was for charity. And it was. She was trying to raise bail money for a man named Kelly who was charged with attempted murder. Now, Big Jim and a cohort stood guard at the door. Her auctioneer, Bandages Cosgrove, but he was better known as a professional bouncer. And Tilly announced to the patrons at the beginning of the party, I don't want you turning this into a riot, and if anyone does, I'll hoist him myself. So they had taken 2 public relations campaigns against each other. Yeah. That would be fun to read that newspaper every day, wouldn't it?
It's kind of like whenever the McDonald's and Burger King have sign wars across the street.
Yeah. There you go.
Dear God.
McDonald's, shut your stupid mouth. Yeah. So now when Tilly was in England, Big Jim Devine had taken to sleeping around with other women, specifically Tilly's girls. And Tilly was humiliated. On January 31st, 1931 was one of the most violent fights that had ever ensued between Jim and Tilly. The house was full of shouting, and while that wasn't unusual, this time something was different. The pair were trading punches and Jim pulled out a gun. Tilly ran from the house and Jim followed her, and he fired several shots, and one hit Tilly in her brand new stiletto shoe. And the neighbors summoned the police, and Jim was arrested and charged with attempted murder. But he was acquitted on January 16th of 1931 because Tilly refused to testify. She wasn't no rat. Now, by 1936, the violence between the women's 2 warring sides was still such an issue that the Sydney Police Commissioner, William Mackay, struck a deal with Kate Leigh and Tilly Devine. If they would stop the bloody battles in the streets, the police would turn a blind eye to their other illegal endeavors. So the women agreed, and the streets of Sydney became quieter. It was an uneasy quiet, but it was quiet just the same. I mean, that's just giving up. Stop fighting in the streets. You can, do your coke and your booze and your hookers.
I mean, it's good for business, though. I mean, that was a smart business decision to cut it out because now they're not paying fines and all that crap. So
right,
it's true. Yeah.
So the relationship between Kate and Tilly, it was strategic, but the relationship between Tilly and Jim Devine, it was pure volatility. This was not a glamorous crime romance. It was explosive from the beginning. Jim Devine was a violent man, even by underworld standards, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who expected others to fear him. And they did. At first, the pair had operated like partners. He was the muscle and she was the brains. But as the empire had expanded and the balance shifted, Tilly became wealthier, more influential, and maybe even more feared. And Jim, who was already unstable, began to resent it.
Can't have that. Yeah, big old burly Big Jim can't have little Miss Tilly Devine outranking him, so to speak, by reputation.
Now, in August of 1942, Tilly threw a lavish party to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. And it turned into one of the most notorious fights. The celebration began like many underworld gatherings. Heavy drinking, music and cocaine circulating quietly between trusted guests, men with razor scars laughing loudly in overcrowded rooms, and women in expensive dresses smoking by windows while lookouts kept watch. Tilly was dressed in silk and diamonds. She enjoyed displaying her wealth. She had risen out of poverty to rule one of the largest brothel networks in Sydney. Jim showed up late and drunk.
Oh, God.
He had been out drinking with his lover, and he had barely acknowledged his wife and headed for the bar to continue to drink. Well, Tilly was determined to keep face, and she continued entertaining her guest. And Jim watched Tilly as she flitted about the party, and he became increasingly agitated when she spoke to other men, particularly those with money and influence. And Jim's jealousy raged. He stood up, and the room changed instantly. People who'd been laughing moments before suddenly began drifting towards the exits. Those who knew the Devines recognized the warning signs. Big Jim crossed the floor and spun Tilly around. He screamed insults at her and accused her of cheating on him. He berated her for acting like she didn't need him anymore. And Tilly screamed back, "My money paid for the house. My business earns the money. It's my name that scares people. Not yours, mine." And once one of them started, the other didn't back down. Glasses were shattered against wall. Furnitures were overturned. Jim grabbed Tilly so violently that he ripped her dress, hitting her and screaming accusations about her lovers, her associates, and her growing independence. And Tilly screamed right back, not frightened, furious. She did not cower from Jim, even when she should have. And a gun was pulled. Now, some claim that Jim pulled the gun, and some say Tilly grabbed it because she knew Jim was out of control. And the guests fled into the streets as the shouting escalated. And Tilly screamed that she knew about his whore. And in retaliation, Jim proclaimed that he was going to marry that woman. And then Jim grabbed a bottle. And Tilly wasn't quite fast enough to dodge. He hit her in the head and knocked her unconscious. And the fight ended just as all the other did, until someone left, someone was unconscious, or until the cops were called. Now, this was a turning point. The anniversary fight revealed something very telling about their relationship. It was no longer a partnership. It had turned into a power struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And Tilly filed for divorce in 1943 on the grounds of cruelty. Their entire marriage had been plagued by violence, affairs, and even attempted murder. She'd had enough, and her divorce was finalized in 1944. Now, Tilly wasn't single for long. She quickly fell in love with a man named Eric Parsons, and they decided to be married. But 3 months before the wedding, they got into an argument and voices were raised, and Tilly shot him in the leg.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ. Sorry. Oh my God. I cannot with this woman.
She was charged with attempted murder, but got off because Mr. Parsons refused to testify. And they were married in 1945.
He still married her? Oh my God.
Hell no.
God.
I mean, she must have loved him because she only shot him once.
She must be incredible in the sack. Because what the hell? Sucked the chrome off a tailpipe or something here? I mean, I don't get it. Like, no, you shoot me, I'm gonna kill you. No.
She didn't like being yelled at. She'd had enough of that crap.
Clearly.
Good
God.
She like, you see that limp? You see that limp you got? Remember where you got that. Don't raise your voice to me.
Wow.
Yeah, do it again. It won't be the only thing limp. Yeah, she.
Now, her wedding reception after her marriage to Eric Parsons lasted all night long, and it was an elaborate party. And when Tilly and her new husband retired to their room at noon the next day, they had barely crawled into bed when 5 fire engines and an undertaker screeched up to the home. Nothing had happened. It was a practical joke by someone who may or may not have been Kate Leigh.
I gotta give it to her. That's pretty funny.
That is funny. So Tilly and Eric, they actually remained married until his death in 1958. Now, in 1948, Kate and Tilly did something extraordinary. They buried the hatchet. And all the gangsters they had come up with were either dead or in prison. And it seemed like all they had left was each other. Not that they were ever good friends. But it wasn't the cops that got Tilly or Kate. In 1955, the tax man came calling. The taxes levied on Kate forced her to sell everything. Kate Leigh's reign was officially ended. And Tilly Devine was presented with a bill for £20,000 in unpaid taxes. Now, in order to comply, she was forced to sell off all but one of her properties, and the single property that remained in operation. But it was firebombed by new criminal entrepreneurs in 1968, thus ending the reign of Tilly Devine. Now, on February the 4th, 1964, Kate Leigh died of a stroke. She may have died broke, but she was a legend, and her funeral was a who's who of the criminal underworld, the police, and the politicians. Tilly Devine attended Kate's funeral in a lavish outfit, and people whispered that she was only there to make sure that Kate was actually dead. And And Tilly herself said to a journalist that she was only there to snoop. But perhaps Tilly simply didn't want to admit that she was there to pay her respects to the only person in Sydney she truly considered an equal. She did later say publicly, "God rest that old bitch's soul."
Damn.
I see why she wasn't a prostitute, though. I mean, she looks like she's straight out of the scene of Pirates of the Caribbean.
She was cute when she was younger. She was an old lady there. Now, on November 24th of 1970, Tilly Devine, the Queen of Woolloomooloo, passed away from chronic bronchitis and cancer in the Concord Reparation Hospital in Sydney. She had once been one of the most notorious women in all of Australia. But when she passed, it was barely noticed by the public. There were a few people that attended her funeral, but not many. And when a woman proposed a toast to her memory in a local bar, nobody even bothered to drink. Her obituary in the Daily Telegraph read, "A vicious, grasping high priestess of savagery, venery, obscenity, and whoredom died. She died friendless and alone for all. She died friendless and alone, and for that she must be pitied. But if they hold a wake for her, the sorrow will be slobber and crocodile tears. She was a wretched, wretched woman."
Jesus.
No love lost there, huh?
No, not at all. Dear God.
Now, it seemed as if Tilly somehow knew that she would not be remembered fondly. She had a much different take on her life in the obituary that she wrote for herself. And in it states, "Give a dog a bad name, and it sticks. I wasn't as bad as I was painted. And there are lots in Sydney who will miss me, even coppers." Now, Tilly Devine, Australia's first lady of vice, veteran of the infamous razor wars of the 1920s, was truly a product of her circumstances. But instead of being a victim, she flipped the board, rewrote the rules, and played the game of life to her advantage. She and her husband, Big Jim Devine, slashed, bashed, and shot their way into notoriety in Australia's underworld history, feared by enemies and allies alike. Tilly Devine and her arch nemesis Kate Leigh were Australia's first real female crime bosses. They were bold, wicked, and enjoyed publicly trying to one-up each other to gain the favor of the people. And in between being in and out of jail, they controlled entire gangs of men and made their fortunes in the underworld, all while taking portraits of themselves in diamonds and fur. And their vicious rivalry was truly the stuff of legend. Now, time seems to be kind to criminals over the years. They become colorful characters with outrageous stories. But don't be fooled. Tilly Devine was a calculating sociopath. Her life ended with a total of 204 criminal convictions for prostitution, theft, assaults, and even for failing to keep a clean house. And it's hard to imagine ourselves in the circumstances that she faced. But while we cannot condone her actions, we cannot outright condemn them either. She is a fascinating, larger-than-life character that rose to power and prominence in a time when women were expected to do as they were told. But it seems that Tilly was never very good at following orders.
That's for damn sure.
So, gentlemen, what do you think of Tilly Devine? And I left out a lot of the violent stories. I know, Chad, that I was talking to you at one point, and I had this thing was 60-something pages.
That's what you said. So,
and I had to cut.
Holy shit.
Because I had that many stories of her and Kate Leigh's confrontations that were just nuts.
Yeah. Well, Chad, I'll let you go first.
Well, I mean, like, it's just, a product of the times, so to speak, but at the same time, it's not, because women doing this was really kind of unheard of. That's not normal. That's why Bonnie and Clyde were so famous, because Bonnie was supposedly this.
Because of Bonnie, not because of Clyde.
Exactly. Because of Bonnie. It was the woman that made them famous, because it was so uncharacteristic. So I mean, I see how they got thrust into this life of one-upping, even because that's just the nature of the game too. Is you got to stay relevant, you got to get your business going. But good God, like,
and they were the two most powerful crime. There were other gangsters in Sydney, Australia, but there were no male bosses. The two tops of the tier on either side of the bridge.
Yeah. Doug said it best.
Devine.
Doug said it best. They ought to make a movie out of this and call it The Godmother.
Really should.
Yeah, no shit. For real.
Make it plural, because
The Godmothers, yeah.
You got a little bit of Kate Leigh. Kate Leigh's story is just as interesting. And I was going to combine it a little bit more, but if so, this thing would have been 150 pages.
Yeah.
Because Kate Leigh was every bit as brutal and wicked. And Kate Leigh was 19 years older than Tilly. And Tilly liked to get into the paper and go, well, she's just so much older than me. I understand. She would take shots at the woman's age. And women, we all know that those are fighting words.
I mean, it is, obviously, I don't condone anything that she did, obviously, but I look at it as the way that what she was born into, being the product of her time, as Chad just said. All of these factors play into the choices that somebody makes. And if they don't know, let's say, any better, by a certain age, this woman started out in this at 12. 12. That is
unforgivable, truthfully.
Number one, yeah. But number two, it's like, how can we expect her to learn any other way other than that by the time that she's so delved into this in later teen years and stuff? It's going to be too late for her to try to have a education or get out of it or whatever. You can't do that. So it's unfortunate the circumstances that she was, number one, born into, number two, the route that she had to end up taking and was forced basically to end up taking by the age of 12. So it's like, I don't condone any of her actions, but I can respect her drive to go, I'm not living in this shit anymore. I'm not being bottom of the barrel. I'm not, I've been dealt a deck of shit cards. I can't change them. I can't do anything about it. So I'm going to make the best of a shitty situation. I can respect that attitude about it. The actions to get there, don't condone it. This woman, personality wise, actions wise, little crazy, little on the crazy side. Calculating sociopath summed it up quite well, Shelley.
Because she was smart.
I was going to say, but overall, yes, we're talking about the underworld. We all know that the underworld exists. We all know that it happens. We all know there's bosses and all that kind of shit, especially back in this time. So I can't condone her actions, but I can respect the drive that she had to do better with the circumstances she had.
I did find it interesting. I did find it interesting that every time those two women clashed, they never really tried to kill each other. It was more like a fisticuff, and they never tried to maim each other's faces to like put marks on each other. It almost was like they were fighting, like they were fighting for show, not for actual go. Because I mean, if I'm getting in a fight with somebody, I'm gonna hurt you, and I'm gonna make sure that you stay hurt for a while. Like I'm breaking your legs. I'm going to snap your arm, and I'm going to cock your jaw off your face. So,
a detail I left out of their public brawls, they all like to wear lots of rings. They would go at each other's faces with their. Again, in one of the pictures that Kate Leigh took whenever she was posing for the photographers, she was wearing 1,000 pounds worth of diamonds. Or maybe it was 1,000 carats. Excuse me, 1,000 carats worth of diamonds. Sorry, I probably misspoken there because I just saw it on my screen that it does say pounds. 1,000 carats worth of diamonds, and they all wore these big rings. So these two women would fight with their fists, and they would mess up each other's face, but they didn't slash each other with razors. Even though we know that Tilly kept one in her fox stole coat,
Yeah, she wasn't afraid to cut your damn throat. Like
she wasn't afraid to cut anybody. It was kind of like there was this almost mutual respect between them. Even though they were willing to throw down, I think they respected the fact that the other fought back.
Yeah.
And the other didn't step aside. And I think the thing
I think it was that's a good point. Sorry. That's a good point of like, were they frenemies or just fighting for publicity? I don't know. I think that there's a little bit of I think there's a little bit of I think they both understood what it meant. To have two women fighting in the street during this time, these women are smart. We've said that. It would have been basically like a PR stunt, you know.
Oh yeah, because now you have to go to their brothels and see how good the girls are.
Exactly.
So this must be awesome.
I think that there is a little bit of like, hey, we know we have dueling territories and stuff, and we are fighting with each other. But if we play it up in the public, it'll give us publicity. Therefore, business will boom. So I think it was a little bit calculation there on both of their parts.
And they were both very smart women. And I think you're right, Chad. The fact that they never tried to maim each other or kill each other. That's pretty telling. I think they genuinely did not like each other, but I think they wholly respected each other.
Yeah.
So, and I think, and again, I'm going to go back on, and what Tilly did was nothing different than what Kate did. Kate got into fights too. Kate threatened people too. I'm just telling you Tilly's part. But if you think about this 12-year-old little girl who has to make her way among men in prostitution, had to learn how to fight, how to keep herself safe, was never allowed to get anybody, nobody could get anything over on her because that would mean the end of her life. That was her education. In the streets, ruthless, violent, fighting, exploited, and she saw awful things. That was how she learned how the world worked. And when she meets the guy, Big Jim Devine, I'm a millionaire, I'm an Australian kangaroo farmer, we're getting married, she abandons her child. That alone tells you that there is something different about her. She just abandons her child. I never found anything said she ever saw him again, that she ever went back to see him, that she ever had any contact. I found nothing, and I looked for that, but I found nothing about that.
Wow.
So that alone spoke to how transient she felt her life was, that people were in and out. And so I don't really think there was a lot of value placed on any one particular person because people came and went so much in her life. So I think Jim Devine used her when we got her over there. He planned on putting her back on the street, and he did. Just another man exploiting her. So I think that was probably when she just decided something was about to be different. She'd been promised something different, and she was going to get something different.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the flip moment of no, I'm not playing this part again. By God, I'm going to figure out how to overtake this and be the one in charge.
Yep.
Right.
Agreed. Fascinating story, though.
Yeah,
I will say the cat fight happening between Kate and Tilly, as fun as it was to hear them go back and forth like some McDonald's Burger King sign war. Like, come on, ladies.
That's entertaining. That's entertaining, though.
It was pretty good.
Those are my dogs, and she should shut her stupid mouth.
It is pretty good. I know if I could reach mine right now, I'd show her on screen, but she is unfortunately
she's
behind.
being
for a minute. I thought you were talking
camera.
about the drag show where they compete against each other, because I've heard shit like that happen on it. Come on, Queen. This is not like, whoa.
So, gentlemen, final thoughts on Tilly Devine. Chad?
God, like, what a crazy story. A true villain origin story. Like, it's nuts. Like,
don't forget the Pomeranian.
My baby, right?
I'll get you next time, Gadget.
We just she just woke up from a nap.
But no, it really is. It's like a true villain origin story here. She's lost her family, she lost everything. She had to put herself into prostitution just to survive and stay fed and fight to be alive. So in the grand scheme of things, she did whatever it took. And it took her down a path that we wouldn't agree with, but it took her down a path that she survived.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what this go around is all about, getting to the end, right? And not dying early. So, I mean, props to her on that. Would I have done it that way? No, but I wasn't ever faced with that kind of a story either. If that was my position, who knows how the tables would have turned. So
yeah.
Right.
No,
Blake,
I'm
thoughts?
going to basically give this furball back real quick. That is my sentiment exactly. I respect the drive that she had to better her life. I don't condone the choices that she made to get there. But in a world, both time, era, and I guess industry that she was in, I can respect what she did for herself to make her life better. Very interesting story. Very interesting life story. I like everything from the cattiness, the Pomeranian, obviously, all of that. It's comical on some parts of it. Some parts are like,
drama.
Holy shit. But what an interesting, bigger than life character, honestly.
I agree. And I'm kind of with you guys in the sense that I respected her fight. Anybody that's ever been in a situation where they've had someone that wants to intimidate you, wants to push you around, wants to do untoward things to you, sometimes the best thing you can do is just walk away, just step back, just cower. And that was something she was not willing to do. And I respect the hell out of her for that. Mm-hmm. She might get her ass beat and she might be on the floor, but she wanted you to know she was not afraid of you. Yeah, I respect that.
Yeah.
So much.
No bullying by her. Like you're just not, she's gonna punch you in the mouth and let you know you can't do that.
That's right. I respect that so much. I think she became what she had to become. If she wanted to be on top, she had to do everything that the male gangsters were doing. Let's point that out. She was doing everything that the male gangsters were doing. Male gangsters were having people, beating people up, breaking their legs, shooting them. They were slashing people with razors too. What do you think the enforcers and the bodyguards did whenever people didn't pay their debts? She did everything that they did. The only difference was she had an arch nemesis who liked to call her names in the paper.
Yeah.
And they fought over a Pomeranian, and her husband was penniless and kangarooless, which that's just a crock of shit.
She had better PR is how it actually turned out.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, and with that, Blake, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
All right, sounds good. Well, if you want to support the show directly, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/EVP podcast. For just $5 a month, you will unlock over 500 Patreon exclusive videos, including the pre and post broadcasts, which are the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live broadcast. So you do get an additional hour with us each week. Also, while you're there, go down to our recommended pages and go check out the Old Park Hotel Patreon page as well, where they have, Chad, how many cameras now?
15
live cameras from inside one of Texas's most haunted, in my opinion, the most haunted hotel that there is. So y'all can go and check that out. And who knows, this weekend you might see yours truly on the screen.
All three of us.
Yeah. Well, this support from this goes directly back to the show and to the Old Park Hotel if you join their page and towards the adventures that we bring you week after week. And if you are not sure about joining Patreon, try it risk-free with our 7-day free trial. Make sure you stay connected with us. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and many more by searching Everything Vaguely Paranormal and looking for the green sound wave. You can also find the Old Park Hotel and Ghost Geeks, which is Chad's team, on Facebook, YouTube, and many more by searching those names and looking those up. I'm glad the dog waited till the closing sign off. And remember, you can catch us live every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube. Also, make sure you subscribe to our Eventbrite page to be notified when public investigation tickets do go on sale. We do have an event this weekend at the Old Park Hotel in Ballinger, Texas, with 4 tickets still left available. It is not sold out, so make sure you go get your tickets if you want to join us this weekend. And we also have 2 additional events at Old Park Hotel, as well as 4 different investigations at Broadhead Manor, and we're working on getting 1 or 2 more up. I can't quite remember, sorry about that. To make all this easier, we're going to add all these links to our link tree, which will be on the Everything Vaguely Paranormal Facebook and X profiles Wednesday. Oh my god, my Steam's
You're tongue-tied. I rubbed off on you. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's okay. On the Everything Vaguely Paranormal Facebook and X profiles, Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, as well as in all of our show notes for you audio listeners, or you can search linktr.ee/Everything Vaguely Paranormal. We are grateful for your continued support. Every like, comment, share, and download keeps the adventures alive. So if you have a favorite episode, share it with your friends. One of the easiest things you can do to help out our show and its rankings, wherever you get your audio from, head over there and simply download our catalog of episodes and leave us a review. And if you have a story, comment, or question, or would like to be a guest on the show, or have us as guests on your show, email us at the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Go like, share, and subscribe to that YouTube channel. Say hello, give us a thumbs up, let us know you were here. So we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight on Everything Vaguely Paranormal. My name is Shelley Pruitt. My partner in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith, You can call him Brad. And my other partner in the paranormal, Mr. Chad Wandell. Thank you for being here. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.